The eternal archives of the Meridian Collective had stood undisturbed for 50,000 years. Its crystalline spires pierced the violet clouds of Nexus Prime, housing the accumulated knowledge of 300 sapient species. No unauthorized being had ever breached its defenses. No secrets had ever escaped its quantum-locked vaults. Until today. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before her quantum telescope array in the Atacama Desert, staring at data readings that shouldn't exist. The massive dish arrays around her hummed quietly under the star-filled Chilean sky as she triple-checked the findings. "This can't be right," she muttered, adjusting her haptic interface gloves. The quantum signatures she was detecting suggested an artificial structure larger than Earth's moon, perfectly hidden in the shadow of Jupiter. But that wasn't what troubled her most. The structure was broadcasting. In English. To the species known as humans, the message began, cycling every 12 minutes. "Your quarantine has been breached. The Meridian Protocol has failed. They are coming." Sarah's hands trembled as she initiated a direct link to the UN Space Council. Before she could complete the transmission, her equipment detected a new signal. Massive objects dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. The Meridian Archive's warning had come too late. High Commander Vexna of the Galactic Conclave watched the approaching human solar system through compound eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. His chitinous exoskeleton, marked with the gold filigree of his station, reflected the soft bioluminescence of the command bridge. "Report," he commanded, his translator converting complex pheromone signals into standard galactic basic. "The quarantine barrier is completely gone, High Commander," his science officer responded. "The humans have been developing completely unsupervised for over 10,000 years." Vexna's antennae twitched in agitation. The Meridian Protocol had been absolute. Primitive species were to be contained and guided into galactic society slowly, over millennia, to prevent cultural and technological shock. Humanity should have been safely behind quantum barriers for at least another 5,000 years. "Show me their development level," he ordered. The holographic display materialized, showing Earth's current technological state. Vexna's compound eyes widened. "Impossible," he breathed. "They've achieved quantum computing without psychic integration, artificial intelligence without hive mind architecture. Their development is wrong." "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted, "we're detecting thousands of small artificial satellites in orbit. Their information network is chaotic, decentralized. We can't shut it down without destroying everything." Vexna felt a sensation he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. Humanity hadn't developed along any of the predicted technological paths. They'd created something new, something unpredictable. On Earth, Sarah Chen was no longer alone. The quantum telescope array had attracted attention. Military vehicles surrounded the facility as generals and scientists tried to understand the implications of her discovery. The objects approaching from deep space had resolved into massive ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever constructed. "Dr. Chen," General Marcus Rivera addressed her, his weathered face grave. "You're telling me that not only are we not alone, but we've been deliberately isolated from galactic society, like some kind of cosmic zoo exhibit." Sarah nodded, still monitoring the incoming vessels. "The quantum signature suggests technology thousands of years ahead of ours." "But," she hesitated. "But what, Doctor?" "They're scared," she said, looking up from her data. "These ships are in a defensive formation. They're not approaching like confident superior beings coming to check on their experiment. They're approaching like someone investigating a potential threat." Rivera's expression hardened. "Why would they be afraid of us?" Before Sarah could answer, every electronic device on Earth flickered. A new transmission, overwhelming all frequencies, began broadcasting globally. "Humanity," the message began, "by order of the Galactic Conclave, you are hereby notified that your unsanctioned development has breached quarantine protocols. Stand down all military forces and prepare for emergency integration procedures." In orbit, automated defense satellites detected the massive energy buildup from the alien fleet. Deep in hardened bunkers, nuclear missiles armed themselves. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for this possibility, even if they hadn't known it was coming. The first shots of humanity's introduction to galactic society weren't fired by either side's weapons. They came from Dr. Sarah Chen's quantum telescope array, broadcasting a signal that made High Commander Vexna's fleet recoil in shock. "What do you mean they've already detected your psychic shields?" Vexna demanded of his science team. "They have no psychic abilities." The human broadcast continued, carrying detailed scans of the fleet's supposedly invisible defensive barriers. Humanity hadn't just seen them. They'd mapped their weaknesses. In the Chilean desert, Sarah worked furiously with her team, their quantum sensors revealing layers of alien technology that the Conclave had thought impossible for humans to perceive. Their entire technological base assumes psychic ability as a foundation, she explained to General Rivera. "But we've developed purely physical ways to detect and interact with quantum fields. We're seeing their technology from an angle they never conceived possible." Rivera nodded grimly, like someone who's only ever seen an infrared suddenly encountering a species that uses visible light. The general's analog comparison proved more accurate than he knew. Across the alien fleet, crews trained for millennia in psychic technology struggled to comprehend human systems that operated on entirely different principles. "They're using directed quantum fields without psychic control," a Conclave scientist reported, their translator struggling to convey their confusion. "It's like they're doing surgery wearing boxing gloves. It shouldn't work, but it does." Humanity's response to the Conclave's demand for surrender came in the form of a simple transmission, broadcast simultaneously from every human quantum facility on Earth. The message contained a comprehensive analysis of the Conclave fleet's defensive capabilities, along with one simple statement: "We see you. Do you see us?" In his command center, Vexna faced a decision that would reshape galactic society. The humans hadn't just developed differently. They'd achieved technological advancement through paths the Conclave had dismissed as impossible millennia ago. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "human vessels are launching from their orbital facilities. Their drive signatures, they're unlike anything in our database." Hundreds of small human ships rose from Earth, each operating on principles that confused Conclave sensors. Where alien ships relied on psychically controlled quantum fields for propulsion, human vessels combined multiple technologies in ways that seemed chaotic, but demonstrated remarkable efficiency. Dr. Chen watched the confrontation through her quantum telescopes, understanding dawning as she observed the alien fleet's reactions. "They're not just surprised by our technology," she told Rivera. "They're surprised we exist at all. We're an impossibility to them." The truth of her words became clear as human ships began maneuvering through space in ways the Conclave fleet couldn't predict. Their computers, unfettered by the need to interface with psychic control systems, processed tactical decisions at speeds that made the alien vessels seem sluggish in comparison. "High Commander," Sarah's voice cut through the tension, broadcasting directly to Vexna's ship. "Your fleet's psychic defenses are impressive, but they're also predictable to anyone who can see quantum fields directly. We've had centuries to develop our technology without the assumptions that come from psychic abilities. Would you like to compare notes?" The offer, delivered with such casual confidence, sent ripples through the Conclave's command structure. Humans weren't just suggesting cooperation. They were offering to teach their impossible methods to the very civilization that had kept them quarantined. In that moment, Vexna understood the true failure of the Meridian Protocol. It hadn't just isolated humanity. It had created something unprecedented. A species that had found entirely new paths to the stars, unencumbered by the standardized development patterns that had guided galactic civilization for 50,000 years. "Stand down weapons," he ordered his fleet, his translator struggling to convey the complex mix of emotions in his pheromone signals. "Begin diplomatic protocols." As human and alien ships began cautious joint maneuvers, exchanging technical data and cultural information. Both sides realized that the galaxy's carefully maintained order had been irreversibly disrupted. Humanity hadn't just survived its quarantine. It had thrived in ways that would force the entire galactic community to reevaluate its most basic assumptions about technological progress. The human element had entered galactic society. Nothing would ever be the same. 6 months after humanity's dramatic entrance into galactic society, the Meridian Archive went dark. Its quantum crystalline spires, which had broadcast knowledge across the galaxy for 50 millennia, fell silent without warning. In the newly established Earth Embassy on Nexus Prime, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at readings that made her blood run cold. The archive isn't just offline, she reported to the Emergency Council. Its quantum signature has changed. Something's consuming it. High Commander Vexna's compound eyes reflected the holographic display, showing the archive's deterioration. Impossible. The archive's defenses are absolute. Unless, his antennae quivered as ancient protocols triggered in his neural implants. Unless what? General Rivera demanded, his hologram flickering beside Sarah's workstation. In the months since first contact, he'd become Earth's primary military liaison to the Conclave. The Devourers, Vexna whispered, a term that sent ripples of fear through the alien delegates, a theoretical threat the archive was built to contain. We thought them merely legends. Sarah's quantum sensors told a different story. Not theoretical anymore. Look at these patterns. The archive's quantum matrix isn't being destroyed. It's being reprogrammed. Something's turning it into a weapon. The Devourers revealed themselves 3 days later. They emerged from the corrupted archive as living streams of quantum energy, ancient digital consciousness that had waited millennia to escape their prison. To the psychically linked species of the Conclave, they were unstoppable, consciousness hackers that could rewrite the neural patterns of any psychically active being. But humanity had no psychic presence to hack. Their attacks can't affect our systems directly, Sarah explained during the Crisis Summit. Our technology developed without psychic integration. We're essentially invisible to their primary weapons, which means we're the only ones who can fight back, Rivera concluded, watching through quantum feeds as the Devourers consumed another Conclave world, turning its population into networked slaves. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen's team had been studying the quantum artifacts discovered in humanity's solar system, the remnants of the quarantine barrier. We can't destroy the Devourers, she announced, but we can contain them, the same way we were contained. The plan was audacious. While Conclave forces fought desperate holding actions, losing ships and crews to the Devourers' influence, human vessels modified with quarantine barrier technology began the counterattack. Their hybrid drives, combining physical and quantum principles in ways the Devourers couldn't predict, let them get close enough to deploy the containment fields. It's working. Sarah's voice cracked with excitement as the first Devourer consciousness was successfully isolated. Their energy patterns can't escape the quantum barrier. But the Devourers hadn't survived millennia of imprisonment without learning. As human ships approached the corrupted archive, the ancient enemy unveiled its own adaptation. The archive's crystalline spires transformed, becoming a quantum weapon that threatened to tear reality itself apart. They're trying to initiate a cascade failure in the quantum field, Sarah reported, her sensors detecting the building catastrophe. If they succeed, they'll destroy this entire sector of space. And themselves, just to stop us. The final battle for the archive became a race against time. Human ships, their crews protected from psychic assault by their very nature, fought their way through swarms of corrupted Conclave vessels. Their mission: reach the archive's core before the Devourers could detonate their doomsday weapon. In orbit above Nexus Prime, Vexna watched with a mixture of horror and amazement as human vessels performed maneuvers his own ships couldn't attempt, their hybrid technology letting them slip through gaps in quantum space that his sensors couldn't even detect. We never imagined, he admitted to Sarah, who monitored the battle from the embassy, that our efforts to contain your species would create the very force needed to save us all. The Archive's core chamber had been designed to resist any psychic intrusion. Its defenses had never been tested against a species that had developed without psychic abilities. As human boarding teams breached the final barriers, they found themselves in a unique position, the only beings in the galaxy capable of touching the untouchable. The fate of galactic civilization rested on humanity's impossible evolution, their forced isolation having created the one thing the Devourers couldn't corrupt, a species that had found its own path to the stars. In the aftermath of the Devourer crisis, the great halls of the Conclave buzzed with an unfamiliar sensation: change. The quantum crystal walls, which had witnessed 50,000 years of carefully maintained tradition, now reflected scenes that would have been unthinkable mere months ago. Human engineers worked alongside Conclave psychics, their contrasting approaches to technology creating innovations that neither civilization could have achieved alone. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the heart of this revolution, her quantum laboratory now a maze of hybrid technologies that bridged the gap between human and alien understanding. It's not just about combining our technologies, she explained to a gathering of Conclave scientists. It's about questioning our basic assumptions about how the universe works. Her words proved prophetic. Across Conclave space, the rigid hierarchy that had governed galactic development for millennia began to crack. Species that had been deemed too primitive for advancement were reevaluated through the lens of humanity's success. High Commander Vexna, once the embodiment of Conclave tradition, found himself leading this transformation. The Meridian Protocol was based on the belief that there was only one path to the stars. He addressed the Conclave Assembly. Humanity proved that isolation doesn't breed weakness. It breeds innovation. The revolution wasn't without resistance. Conservative factions within the Conclave warned about the dangers of unrestricted development. They pointed to the chaos of human society, its competing nations and ideologies, as proof that the old ways were safer. But they couldn't argue with results. The hybrid ships that emerged from human Conclave cooperation outperformed anything either civilization had created alone. Quantum computers, freed from the requirement of psychic interfaces, achieved processing speeds that transformed galactic communications. "We're not just changing technology," General Rivera observed during a strategic briefing. "We're changing how the galaxy thinks about progress itself." The truth of his words became apparent as younger members of psychic species began experimenting with human methods of problem-solving. They discovered that while their natural abilities gave them certain advantages, approaching challenges from multiple angles, both psychic and physical, yielded better results. Perhaps the most profound change came in education. The Conclave had always practiced a form of direct knowledge transfer, using psychic links to pass information from teacher to student. Human learning methods, based on questioning, experimentation, and even failure, introduced concepts that shocked traditional educators. "You mean you let them make mistakes?" a Conclave education minister asked, their translator struggling to convey their disbelief. "We don't just let them," Sarah replied with a smile. "We encourage it. Innovation comes from trying things that might not work." This philosophy spread through galactic society like a quantum wave, unstoppable and transformative. Species that had been locked into predetermined developmental paths for generations began exploring new possibilities. The rigid structure of the Conclave began to evolve into something more dynamic, more adaptable. The Archive, rebuilt after the Devourer crisis, reflected this new reality. Its crystalline spires no longer just stored knowledge. They became centers of active experimentation, where different species could share their unique perspectives on the universe. "We were so focused on preserving stability," Vexna admitted to Sarah during the Archive's rededication ceremony, "that we forgot the importance of growth. The Devourers nearly destroyed us not because they were stronger, but because we had become too predictable." The human element had done more than save the galaxy from an ancient threat. It had introduced something the Conclave had forgotten over its millennia of careful control: the power of diversity. Each species, each civilization had the potential to find its own path to the stars. As the first generation of hybrid human conclave innovations transformed galactic society, a new understanding emerged. The universe was vast enough for many paths, many approaches, many ways of thinking. The true strength of civilization lay not in conformity, but in the creative chaos of different perspectives working together. The revolution of thought had begun, and there was no going back. 10 years after humanity's dramatic entrance into galactic society, the stars themselves seemed different. The rigid quantum lanes that had once defined galactic travel gave way to a complex network of hybrid routes, combining traditional psychic navigation with human-developed quantum tunneling. From her office in the new Convergence Academy on Nexus Prime, Dr. Sarah Chen watched ships of every species traverse these new pathways. Some moved with the fluid grace of pure psychic propulsion, others with the determined efficiency of human engineering, and many with combinations that would have been impossible a decade ago. We used to think chaos was the enemy of progress, High Commander Vexna observed, his once rigid posture now relaxed as he joined her at the viewport. Now we understand it's the source of innovation. The Convergence Academy stood as a symbol of this new understanding. Where the Meridian Protocol had once enforced separation and controlled development, the Academy celebrated diversity of thought and approach. Species that had been deemed too primitive for advanced technology now contributed unique perspectives that transformed galactic science. "Remember when you first detected our quarantine barrier?" Sarah asked, smile playing at her lips. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Vexna's compound eyes reflected the stream of traffic below. "We thought we were containing a potential threat. Instead, we were preserving something essential, the ability to think differently." The greatest testament to this transformation could be found in the new generation of galactic citizens. Young conclave members naturally integrated psychic abilities with physical technology, while human children learned to appreciate the efficiency of psychic communication without losing their innovative spirit. General Rivera, now the head of the Joint Human Conclave Defense Force, had witnessed this evolution firsthand. "Our strongest weapons aren't our ships or our technology," he told a class of mixed-species cadets. "They're our different ways of seeing the universe." The truth of his words had been proven repeatedly. When a quantum storm threatened the Arcturus sector, it was a combination of conclave psychic forecasting and human chaos theory that predicted its path and saved billions. When a dormant space-time anomaly activated near Earth, conclave energy manipulation working alongside human probability engines contained it. But perhaps the most profound change was philosophical. The discovery of humanity's successful isolation had sparked a galaxy-wide renaissance of independent thought. Species began questioning not just how they developed technology, but why they developed it in certain ways. "We've entered an age of infinite paths," Sarah announced at the Academy's annual symposium. "Every species, every world, every individual has the potential to find new ways forward. Our strength lies not in following a single road to the stars, but in forging countless paths and sharing what we learn along the way." The old Meridian Archive, once a repository of controlled knowledge, had been transformed into the Confluence Network, a living library where different approaches to science, technology, and understanding could intermingle and evolve. Its quantum crystal spires now pulsed with a combination of psychic resonance and human-style quantum computing, creating something entirely new. "We're not just combining technologies," Vexna explained to a gathering of galactic leaders. "We're combining ways of thinking. Each perspective, each approach, adds another layer to our understanding of the universe." As the sun set on Nexus Prime, casting the Convergence Academy's hybrid architecture in golden light, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Humanity hadn't just survived its quarantine. It had emerged to show the galaxy a fundamental truth. There was no single right way to reach the stars. The Lords of the Stars had learned that true power didn't come from controlling the path of civilization, but from allowing it to branch and grow in unexpected directions. Humanity's arrival hadn't just shaken the galactic order. It had transformed it into something far greater than the sum of its parts. In the end, the greatest discovery wasn't faster than light travel, or quantum computing, or even psychic communication. It was the simple truth that every species, every civilization, had something unique to contribute to the grand tapestry of galactic society. The age of rigid protocols and controlled development was over. A new dawn had arrived, one where the path to the stars was as diverse as the species who sought to walk it.